Hello, my name is James Whitbrook. I'm a graduate student at Northwestern Health Sciences University, pursuing a Master's of Science in Integrative Care with a focus on trauma. My academic journey evolved from a lifelong interest of psychological, social, and psychological borderlands of identity, specifically how structural limitations interact with and impact personal development. So within this program, I'm taking a bit more of a scientific approach at adult development, particularly examining how trauma, PTSD, and chronic stress impact career and vocational performance. In today's brief talk, I'm going to explore the neurobiology of scarcity and how resource constraints shape cognitive function, decision-making, and well-being. I will also be exploring the intersection of scarcity with trauma, stress, and addiction, as well as attention-sensitive strategies for fostering resilience and recovery. All right, my central argument is threefold. One, scarcity is not just about poverty, it affects everyone, shaping behaviors through predictable neurobiological mechanisms. Two, understanding these mechanisms allows for more compassionate and effective interventions. And three, trauma-informed, attachment-sensitive approaches can help mitigate the cognitive and emotional burdens of scarcity, supporting long-term well-being. So the universal experience of scarcity. Scarcity is a fundamental human experience that transcends socioeconomic boundaries. And while poverty represents perhaps its most persistent form, scarcity manifests across all socioeconomic strata. Whether we're talking about limited time during a workday, which we all experience, or insufficient resources for organizational demands, or constraints on emotional bandwidth during stress. Knowledge workers bouncing between emails and meetings, describing feeling time poor, or parents experiencing an attention deficit from competing priorities, service professionals facing a burnout from attempting to accomplish more and more with less and less. In each case, they engage with the same cognitive mechanisms that operate in conditions of material poverty, albeit typically with greater buffers and recoveries for supports. Research demonstrates how scarcity fundamentally alters cognitive processing in four key dimensions. One, attentional allocation. When resources are scarce, the brain shifts from deliberate top-down processing to more reactive bottom-up processing. This attentional capture is largely involuntary, operating below conscious awareness. The attentional capture is largely involuntary. Oops, repeated myself. As Monahan and colleagues in 2016 noted, scarcity itself captures attention via bottom-up processes happening below conscious control. The second is decision fatigue, making frequent trade-off decisions a hallmark of resource scarcity. It depletes mental energy and leads to progressive decline in decision quality. Unlike physical fatigue, individuals generally remain unaware of this deterioration in cognitive capacity. Third impact is temporal distortion. Scarcity impacts temporal perception through hyperbolic discounting, the tendency to prioritize immediate rewards over potentially larger future benefits. This orientation towards immediate relief rather than representing impulsivity reflects an adaptive response to resource constraints. Fourth is embodied impact. The neurobiological effects extend beyond cognition to impact physical health through chronic activation of stress response systems, leading to altered cortisol patterns, increased inflammatory markers, and elevated allostatic load, all significant determinants of long-term health outcomes. So the intersections with trauma and addiction. When scarcity intersects with trauma, the neurobiological impacts multiply through synergistic interactions. The cognitive burn created by resource constraints reduces bandwidth available for processing traumatic experiences. Unresolved trauma compromises executive functioning necessary for managing scarcity. And together, these create a heightened vulnerability to both substance use disorders and behavioral addictions through disruption of the dopaminergic reward pathways. And as Limke teaches us, chronic stress and trauma alter baseline dopamine functioning, creating states of reward deficit that drive compensatory behaviors. And when these neurobiological changes occur in contexts of material scarcity, individuals face compounded challenges in accessing adaptive coping strategies. Attachment sensitive intervention strategies are great for individuals who are impacted by the intersection of scarcity and trauma. Attachment sensitive approaches offer some really significant advantages. Structured yet flexible approach, and specifically addressing shame and isolation from scarcity trauma interactions. Playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, P.A.C.E. This attachment sensitive framework, developed by Hughes in 2007, provides a structured yet flexible approach for developing therapeutic relationships. These address the shame and isolation created by scarcity and trauma interventions. Playfulness creates a hope-filled commitment to the therapeutic relationship, counteracting the heaviness that often accompanies resource constraint. Acceptance recognizes that behaviors, often judged as problematic, represent adaptive responses to genuine neurobiological constraints. Curiosity illuminates the hidden cognitive and emotional processes that drive behaviors often misunderstood by others. Empathy directly challenges the isolation described by Bell Hooks in 2004 when she mentions the agony of believing that you are not capable of being understood. Within innovative strategies for working with people using an attachment sensitive approach, one of which is inner critic work. The picture on the screen here is from Chelsea Whitbrook, published her book, Blessing My Demons, under former name Chelsea Forbrook. And the inner critic addresses the shame-based narratives that often accompany experiences of resource constraint. The benefits of inner critic work are they create awareness of when critical thoughts intensify in relation to scarcity triggers. Inner critic work helps establish distance between the individual and the critical thoughts, engaging with the critic in dialogue to explore protective functions. Engaging the critic in dialogue helps explore the inner critic's purpose to serve in a protective way. The inner critic also allows the person to be able to negotiate new agreements that honor the critic's concern for the person while also setting boundaries. And engaging with the inner critic also invites for a transformational relationship that serves for healing and growth. Forbrick's strategies are to name, tame, and bless the demon using a distancing approach that involves drawing the character and creating a caricature, including a name of that critic, which she discusses and models in her teaching memoir, Blessing My Demons. Dopamine regulation and cognitive slack. So there's some practical strategies that complement the relational approaches of attachment sensitive counseling. One is dopamine awareness. So by setting specific boundaries around behaviors that create dopamine regulation, tracking withdrawal symptoms during reduction of addictive behaviors, and introducing healthy activities that stimulate reward pathways while building connection helps the client be able to engage in conversations about and also sense into their body with awareness the way that dopamine is impacted in a dysregulated way, and then experience also the follow-up sensation of a more regulated dopaminergic system. Building cognitive slack. Here we're talking about creating intentional breaks between demanding tasks, reducing unnecessary decisions to preserve mental bandwidth, breaking overwhelming projects into manageable components, and implementing consistent daily rhythms that reduce decision-making burden. So these can be strategies that a practitioner, counselor, direct service person can use to engage with a client to be able to give them some practical steps for being able to be compassionate towards their own sense of scarcity, while also helping them create a cognitive infrastructure that still drives forward momentum towards their goals. So here we're just going to go through a brief case example. This character is a made-up person to represent more of a collective whole. This is Maria. Maria is a 32-year-old single mother working 2 part-time jobs who uses alcohol to, as she states, turn off her brain after overwhelming days. Maria describes herself as feeling as though she is always behind, always chasing, and always failing. So with Maria, the recommendation is to use the PACE, P-A-C-E approach. The PACE approach will help Maria reframe her struggles as evidence of creativity rather than failure, and recognize her alcohol use as an adaptive attempt to manage overwhelming states. For the practitioner who's working with Maria, when Maria states something like, "I'm just not good enough at managing money," then the practitioner might instead be able to respond, "Well, actually, I notice some financial mastery that you might be overlooking. Would it be okay with you if I share some observations about what I see as you actually really creatively stretching your finances in a really impossible situation with impossibly few resources?" By using inner critic work, it can help Maria identify when those self-critical thoughts intensify with and around her financial pressures or with other pressures. One potential strategy might be that Maria and her counselor spend some time really separating the inner critic thoughts from what is actually happening in Maria's life. And perhaps in doing this, they're able to create enough distance that then we could follow Forbrick's model of creating a caricature of the inner critic. Perhaps Maria names the inner critic the scarcity hall monitor, and then draws, using Forbrick's model, would then really bring that character to life by drawing out, with whatever sorts of artistic skill this person has or doesn't have, doesn't matter. But Maria can create an entire persona of this scarcity hall monitor. And so how would a hall monitor in a school be chasing the students who are late for class and always on them? And perhaps the way that the inner critic speaks to Maria reminds her of the hall monitor in school who was always nagging her when she was late to class. So by adding a little bit of playful comedy to this, it doesn't negatively offset the impact that the inner critic is having on Maria, but it helps Maria also develop what we call the inner observer, who's able to see the mind talking and making stories about the situation, which also then levels up and allows Maria to be able to reappraise and reframe her life situation. Throughout all of this, it will help her develop more self-compassion amid ongoing restraints. So in conclusion, the neurobiological impacts of scarcity offer a really powerful framework for understanding behaviors that are often misattributed to personal failings. By recognizing how resource constraints predictably alter cognitive function, we can develop more effective and compassionate interventions that address underlying mechanisms rather than symptoms. This integrated understanding offers relevant insights across contexts, from executive burnout in managerial positions all the way to poverty-related trauma, by illuminating the universal human response to resource limitation. Through this shared neurobiological lens, we can develop greater empathy and more effective support for all individuals experiencing the cognitive and physiological impacts of having too little. So thank you for your time and attention. And here are some references, and then I'll also include these in the attachment that goes along with this.